The Strymon Timeline has been out for over a decade at this point, and it's still one of the most viable delay pedals out there. There's a ton of options packed into it, but one of the most common questions that I get is, what delay types do I actually need for a Sunday morning? So today I want to answer that question and walk through my workflow as far as my delay settings and how I use the timeline in a live worship mix. Now, as far as my workflow goes, if you've seen my video walking through the Big Sky, this is going to sound pretty familiar. I'm a simple guy. Lots of people do the preset thing where they save a preset for each individual song, which is great. It's just not my thing. I just like to be flexible and have more options at my disposal and not be so locked into song-specific presets in case inspiration strikes or maybe there's a down moment that calls for a particular type of sound. I like to be able to just pull that up at a moment's notice. But for that question of what do you actually need for a Sunday morning, I would say that you need a pretty standard delay type, maybe like analog or tape or digital. For me, tape delay is my go-to workhorse delay sound because I feel like it sits in this really nice place where you can hear the brightness of the effect of the delay, but it also degrades enough where the repeats kind of sit underneath your playing and creates a really nice ambience. I do also have digital and analog presets, but we'll get there in a minute. As far as how I use tape delay though, I use it actually very similar to my Big Sky. Again, if you've seen that video, it'll make a little bit more sense, but the way that I like to dial things in is I like to have kind of a small, medium, and large option depending on how bright I want the repeat to be, how present I want it to be, because different songs call for different parts, or if you're playing lead or if you're playing rhythm, sometimes you need a slightly different delay sound as far as how present it is. So I have 3 presets doing exactly that. I have a low, medium, and high tape sound that really will cover whatever ground you need to cover on a Sunday morning. So here's what those sound like. You probably noticed that all of these were set to a dotted eighth subdivision, mainly because it's so popular in worship music, but I actually do have these same 3 presets just copied over as an 8th subdivision as well. Some songs actually do swap mid-song from a dotted eighth to an 8th sound. So having some quick options for how quiet or loud the delay sound is, as well as the different subdivisions, make it really easy to quickly pull up what I need at a moment's notice. By the way, I will have all of these delay presets available for download down in the description, so feel free to check out the link below if you want to grab these for yourself. But like I mentioned earlier, I do have a preset for analog as well as digital. In case I want something that's a little bit darker and a little bit more warbly, I do have that analog setting. And then on the flip side, if I need something that's really bright and pristine, I have a digital preset for that as well. So here's what the analog sound sounds like. Like I said, it's pretty dark and it almost kind of blends in with your playing. You don't necessarily hear the repeat of the delay very present, but it just adds a ton of depth. I tried to mirror it off of a Memory Man. But in case you need to cover something on the other side of the spectrum, something really clean, something pristine, very bright delay, here is what the digital delay sounds like. Now, there are some crazy ambient sounds coming up pretty soon, but the last standard delay that I have dialed in is a dual delay. And I like to think of this as kind of my Phil Wickham sound. You don't hear dual delays all too often, but I have this dialed in pretty bright, and it is a pretty in-your-face dual delay that you'll hear from time to time in a Phil Wickham song that kind of just has that crazy effect to it. So here's what that sounds like. So as far as what you really need for a Sunday morning, these staple delay tones will definitely get you there. But I like to have some more ambient options available as well. Usually for swells and more down moments, I rely pretty heavily on the Big Sky just with some more washy tones to help kind of fill that space. But the Timeline actually has the ability to create some really interesting textures. So I'm just gonna play through a couple of presets that I've saved that are very different from one another, but they kind of fill the same hole, where I would probably use these in more down moments, definitely with some heavier reverb, something to just add some texture when inspiration strikes. So like I mentioned, they all sound very different from one another, but they do kind of fill a similar role. And I don't use them too often, but for those down moments where maybe you need something a bit more rhythmic or something with some more texture, it does add kind of another dimension versus just swelling in with chords. And again, like I mentioned earlier, all of these will be available for download at the link below. So feel free to hit me with any questions that you might have, but you can check them out there if you want to grab these for yourself. I did also mention a couple of times the video that I did walking through the Big Sky and kind of my workflow when it comes to reverbs. So I'll have that linked right up here. Feel free to click over and check that one out, and I will see you in the next one.